Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Welcome in. Jump into the chat as always. Say hello. We're going to let everybody just get in. Everybody's logging in, kind of getting used to the system again. We've got our slides up. You should be able to see those. You should be able to hear me. You should be able to see me. We're excited to bring some unbelievable content to you today. We'll get into some of those details here in just a moment, like we always do. But again, just giving everybody just a moment to kind of get in, grab some note-taking materials. And if everybody's jumping in and saying hello, thanks for that. If you have any specific outcomes that you have for today, feel free to throw those in the chat now. I'll be taking a look at those. Again, we're going to get started here in just a moment. All right, it looks like most people are finding their way in. We're expecting well over 100 today, so we're definitely going to have a lot of conversations in the works. And then as always, we'll have this recorded and sent back out. I'm going to go ahead and get us started here as we're talking about development planning. Again, for those of you that haven't met me, my name is Casey Clark. I think at this point, you guys know who I am. I do these pretty much every month, but I know we have some new folks that have joined us. So if I haven't met you, it's nice to meet you virtually on the webinar, and I'll look forward to potentially meeting you in person at some point. At a high level here, we're also going to have Jeremy join us as well, one of our advisors here out of the Chicagoland area. He's a fantastic advisor. He's got a lot of great experience that I'll have him speak to when we bring him in as a special guest. But he's going to be speaking to some very specific parts that are really important to him as we get into some of our content. So look forward to hearing from me, but also you're also going to get a chance to hear from Jeremy today. All of our webinars, they are sponsored by JustWorks. JustWorks is a phenomenal PEO partner for us. That means they take care of all of your HR needs. They are US-based only, I apologize, but they love the content we put on. And so they've backed us and given us a small budget that we can use to kind of help drive even more content to everybody. So just want to give them a big shout out and wish that everybody would go take a chance to look at them, especially if you have any development needs on sexual harassment, on discrimination, anything like that type of training you want to provide. JustWorks is a great resource for that. So I encourage you to look into them a bit. But we're going to talk about our platform here just for a moment. As always, I see most of you already jumping on the chat, so thanks for that. As far as polls and action items, I'll be shooting those out over time, so stay engaged, look for those opportunities, and lastly, we'll have some resources in the Learning Center we'll point you to take advantage of next steps. So I see you've got one or two people having a small audio issue. Just let us know in the chat. We're working with you on that. If your computer's having any issues, we'll do our best to help you navigate that. Otherwise, let's get in. I've got just a couple community updates I want to give to everybody before we get into the thicker content. Catapult 2020, obviously we're in the middle of a pandemic. We don't know exactly what this means for November. We do know the conference will happen. It will either happen 100% virtually or virtually and live. So we are ready to announce that. We're down to 2 final options. We'll be working to make those decisions over the next 30 days with the more information that comes our way. The biggest root that we're having is the fear of the CDC in the US not allowing larger groups to get together still at that point. So obviously our intention is to keep everyone safe. So just rest assured we are still doing Catapult no matter what. And I want to give everybody an update that our hope is to be able to still do it live with streaming virtual, but worst case, we will for sure run it 100% virtual, and we'll get really creative the way that we do here at Cultivate to ensure there's massive amounts of value. So wanted to make sure I had a chance to announce that. The other announcement here is our next CEO webinar is on June 17th. We're going to be talking about increasing your funnel. I'm speaking to the marketing funnel. How do you increase the number of prospects that are in your funnel that then you can sell to? Really excited to have that conversation. We're actually bringing in one of our advisors and also our marketing director here at Cultivate, Conrad Kozuch. So he'll be joining me and really bringing some powerhouse power tips to everybody's marketing world. So we're excited to bring that content. We're already working on that behind the scenes. So look forward to that. And another quick announcement on the events. For those of you that joined us for our Cultivate Your Success event last month, we usually do those, as you all know, in our different regions. And we had to do it all virtually based on what's going on with COVID-19. And we're really excited we got to try that. It didn't go perfect. We had a lot of good learning, but it was something new that we tried, and we're glad we took the risk. We sent out a survey. A lot of people took the survey, so thank you for your feedback. Based on that feedback, we have made a decision to turn all of our webinars as well as all of our Cultivate Your Success from now through the end of the year, just based on while we kind of let this COVID thing do its thing, to do this format where we're going to bring a bunch of great content just like this, and then we'll go into breakouts after. So now instead of just an hour webinar, we'll go to more like a 90-minute experience. And then on the Cultivate Your Success, they were usually 3 hours. We're going to strip those back down to an hour and a half, but we're going to do them consistently every month. Again, you can come to the content portion. You don't have to go to the round table. or you can stick around and jump into the roundtables. We had a lot of good learning around the roundtables last month, a lot of great feedback around we need to structure those a bit more. We agreed, we felt that too. So we're going to be structuring the roundtables based on stages. So that way we can bring as much value as we can and put the business owners in very similar seats together. So we're going to try that at the next time. Again, this is a pilot. We don't see us necessarily doing this long term as of right now, but for sure for the next several months through this process of 2020 of COVID-19, this is how we're going to be approaching that. So make sure you sign up for that next event in June, because we'll be getting into some great content and then going into breakouts and trying that again. So we're excited to be able to offer that to everybody in the community. This is what we're looking at as far as the rest of our schedule. So again, increase your funnels in June. Then we'll get to talk about talent, then how to scale from there, and then from a bit of a fun one in December, which we have planned to look back at 2020, which is a bit of a surprise. I want to let that cat out of the bag yet. So looking forward to the upcoming webinars. And then again, those Cultivate Your Successes will now be in this same format where we bring training from not just me, but other great advisors on the team, and then move into breakouts. So I think that's clear. And obviously, a lot of you know you've been on the platform, so thanks for that. My biggest encouragement is just if you have questions, jump on there and let us know. I've got advisors and myself, we're watching it. We'll jump in with answers. It's there to be a resource, so you don't always have to go to your advisor outside of the time, maybe via email. So anytime you think about sending an email to your advisor with a question, maybe the better response is to go to the platform and let's start to get a bunch of engagement. We've got some things coming down the pipe to help support that. But we're excited to have that launched, and thanks everybody for jumping on so quick. So let's dive into the content. As always, I've got to set my few expectations. We're going to have a bunch of content here from all different stages. Obviously, most of you know what these stages are at this point. So just be conscious that we're going to be training on different elements of what people need. And you don't have to be a rocket scientist, right? Just remember that. This content is not going to be something that is over the top. You may have even seen some of this content before that we've taught, and maybe it's just done in a different way. Remember, it's your responsibility to find those 1 or 2 items that you can move up the ladder from beginner to expert. We're not going to make that full transition today, but your goal, just reminder, 2 clear outcomes. At the end of this, can you have 2 things you never want to forget? That means we had a successful webinar today. So here's the agenda. We're going to talk about what happens if we don't development plan with our people, even more crucial in this current environment. We'll talk about why. Jeremy's going to come in and talk about what goes into the development planning aspect, and then I'll come back and I'll connect the development planning to the performance culture, and how do those actually intertwine, and how do you implement that further based on what Jeremy's going to talk about. And we're going to be running a bit of a workshop through this whole process. So we're really excited to walk you through this content. I think you're going to leave with some really, really tangible things that you can go do with your team. So let's just do a quick chat in. Why is development of employees important to you? Jump on the chat here, and I would just love to hear a bit of what is happening for you that makes you think development employees is important or not important. And if there's any specific outcomes you have, now's a good time to share. Again, we'll do our best to tailor the content as we're walking through everything today. John, case in point, correct. Employees do help you scale. Most businesses need employees. That's fair enough. Sean, great. Yeah, how do we get them aligned? That's such a hard part. Absolutely. I love that. They can do more, I can do less. Take their own initiative. How do you get that more ownership from them? I know all of us, we often are just saying, right, if we could just duplicate ourselves, if we could just replicate who we are, we could go so much faster. This is great. Some good information here in terms of why is this important. And this already starts to tell me a little bit of where we're going to focus that, and it's very in line with some of our content. So that gets me excited. Thank you for sharing that, everybody. We're required to operate in the gray right now. I did a webinar series yesterday for a group, and they had a very specific request of what they wanted me to talk about. And when I went into the content, I loved it so much, I pulled an audible last minute and brought some of that content into today. And it's this theory of we're all required to lead in the gray more than ever right now. More than ever, we are required to lead in the gray versus black and white. And that can be very uncomfortable for a lot of us, especially when maybe we're not built with the right structure or we're still in scale mode. All of us are in different places in our business. And it's just something we have to think about is, our employees are dealing right now with this at home for a lot of them. Not all, but a lot. Maybe even some of you are dealing with this. And this picture just really spoke to me when I found it. in terms of the reality of our world right now that's requiring so much more gray leadership. And we're getting ready to potentially navigate back to this. Again, I say potentially because we don't know what's in store fully yet. We're still slowly walking through. And some obviously are going back to restaurants, all different industries. This was just a simple photo I could find to provide the context that we're coming out of our homes and back in. But I think the reality is that even some of us, but more importantly, some of our employees, I think they may still miss this and actually still want some of this. And that's something we have to be very conscious of. And again, that's what's creating our need to be more comfortable with the gray versus black and white. And that's really just such a good pivotal message to apply to why development planning is so important, because it's about tailoring and it's about really having the right structure and the right setup with that specific employee. And then as a masses, you get the scale. So the strategy of today, right? I know you feel this way. This is what resonates for me too. It's who knows what it is for tomorrow? We don't know how these states reopening are going to work. There's a lot of uneasiness. In fact, a lot of us maybe have even thrown the white towels a little bit and started to just go, well, let's just see what happens. We've got to stay optimistic. We've got to understand how big of an opportunity this still is and how much market share we can capture through this process by staying in the details and having a strategic plan to do our best to navigate all these transitions and all this gray that we're dealing with. I ultimately believe that us that are the most agile will thrive at the highest point. It's really our decision on how we want to approach this period of time as business owners. And people are going to come out and scale more than they ever thought was possible out of this environment. And others will barely survive it. And it really is going to come down to a mindset and a continuous effort to keep shifting. We all were pivoting and shifting 2 months ago. I've heard a little less of that. I've heard a little less momentum. That's a mindset. It's because we're getting tired at the end of the curve. We have to regenerate that energy. And I'm finding that pushing myself to go, it's okay to be in the gray is one way that I can get myself comfortable and out of maybe looking at the downside of what's happening. So I hope that helps speak to those that maybe need to hear that right now. But there are some things that are black and white. And that's what really connects to development planning, right? The black and white piece of this is you need people to retain, you need them to engage, and you still need them to perform. None of those three things are going to go away, right? Because if we don't develop, if we don't actually develop our people, there's a few scenarios I want to walk you through that you will see, and I know you've already most likely experienced in some capacity. Attrition, right? We've all had attrition. And I had this discovery a couple months ago when I realized that most business owners, even some of our advisors, we started tricking ourselves to thinking that attrition was only when an employee leaves us. Oh, that's what our attrition rate is. No. It also is when we also remove them, which some of us are furloughing or we're removing some of our employees because we don't have enough revenue. We're going through these different experiences. Well, that's due to COVID, sure. But there's also a need of development planning. And without development planning, I think what you'll find is your risk of attrition is much, much higher. So I want to help you just get a quick cost of attrition. This is a simple workshop I like to go through to help people understand how much does attrition really cost you? How much does it really cost for the cost of hiring, which is advertising, interviewing, screening, and hiring? If you want to follow along, just maybe write down the dollar amount. How much do you spend to hire each person in your firm? If you don't know this, you're going to want to figure this out. The second number to write down would be, well, what's the cost of onboarding? How much does it actually cost to bring this person in, the time, the amount of salary and the cost of training that person? What about the lost productivity? When you start over, right, you've got that other person for the next 2 years who doesn't know that job nearly as well as the person who left. How do you navigate those decisions, right? How do you navigate how to approach that person who's slowing down in those first 2 years before they can get up to fully up to speed at the same level? What's the cost of lost engagement? Other employees see the turnover. They start to disengage, maybe lose a little sight of the vision or the buy-in. Maybe there's different errors that they take on, right? When this other employee who left, this new employee, they're going to learn. And a lot of ways that people learn is by trying and failing. You have to kind of pay and see that failure through. That's a big investment. What about the training cost? The amount of dollars that are spent in the first 3 years, I find it's almost 20% of someone's salary is spent in just training outside of the onboarding training. Or then lastly, on the cultural impact side, whenever somebody leaves, others are going to take the time to ask why. It's very common that that happens. When you add these 7 up, this is a massive dollar amount that can really come out of this. And Donald, I see that you're thinking about 30 to 40% of annual salary is what you're thinking in the overall cost. You're close, but what SHRM has gone out and surveyed and find, again, this is also a lot of larger companies, but they're saying it's anywhere to 50 to 250% of someone's annual salary is actually the cost to your business when an employee leaves your organization, either because you remove them or or they left on their own account. Those are big numbers, and I can break this down even further for you to help you see that what goes a little further and how I would show this is that 250% I think is more of those technical or those higher level leaders versus the 50% is probably more entry level employees. It's much easier to find entry level employees, train them, bring them on. You can replicate much faster than a higher level leader in your organization. So if I just guess salaries, feel free to run this same analysis here, but if you were to take $125,000 salary, whatever it is, and times by 250%, this is the cost that you're taking on over time. And then same on the entry level, it's still a large dollar amount depending on who's on your team. So I want you to think about this, and maybe this is a bit of a motivation to go, wow, I've really got to slow down and make sure I'm development planning, because losing even just one more employee than I should have within a year, it can absolutely cost you. It is a huge number to be conscious of. Now, if attrition isn't what you're nervous about, or that's not necessarily what you're concerned with, engagement should be, right? There's this classic example I always give where if you have 10 people trying to take this boulder up a hill with these ropes, imagine the idea that 3 people are pulling really hard, 5 are just kind of trudging along, they don't really care, they're not really adding much. And then imagine you've got the 1 or 2 people who are just completely unengaged, just trying to saw the ropes and have it all fall back down. Come on, you just thought of an employee. I know you did. You just thought of somebody that you just went, I can know who was probably doing that. And that is such a big part of keeping people engaged, because otherwise you have people potentially working against you, and they may not even be conscious of what they're doing to the organization. Gallup did a survey, and they said that 34% is what the average cost is of someone's salary when they are disengaged. They went on to say that in that same survey I looked up, 17.2% of the US workforce is actively disengaged, I apologize. That would be really bad if only 17% were engaged. 17% are disengaged. So take the math, right? Here's the quick formula. Let's say you have a head count of 20, input your head count, times it by 17.2%, and that'll tell you just a rough estimate of potentially how many disengaged employees you currently have. Let's times that then by their salary, which we need to take 34% of whatever you pay them over the year, because again, that's the amount the cost of based on the Gallup surveys that they did. That would mean that we take the number of disengaged employees times the disengaged employee amount of cost to get you your total. Yeah, Nick, it's absolutely scary. So this development planning, my whole point of this was to really create a gap for all of you to realize this isn't just a nice to have. It's not even just the future of business. This is about optimizing your business with your people and taking them to the next level. And by doing so, your ROI directly back to you as a business owner is the disengagement, holding that back, as well as managing attrition. And when those two things are in check, the best they can possibly be, you start to understand why development planning is so important. Because development planning is going to hold back the ability to hit this performance culture. The reality is that this is such a simple system to use. This comes from Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a great, simple model to really connect trust, conflict, commitment, accountability equals results. Well, if you don't slow down and have development planning, it's very, very difficult to pull that in to how to create the trust, to have comfortability around the conflict, to know what the commitment should be, to know how to hold accountability. Development planning is essentially doing this with your team members. And I'm going to slow this down a bit later in the webinar and go a little further after we let Jeremy speak here in a bit. But this is what ultimately connects back and why development planning is so important. So I have a quick question. I just want to throw it out to the group before we get a little deeper here. How many hours does your average employee receive in formal skill development each month? I want to launch a poll, and I just want to capture this information here. So we're going to throw this up here so you guys can all connect. I've got either 4 hours or less a month, 5 to 9 hours a month, 10 to 14 hours a month, or 15 plus hours a month. How many hours is truly in formal development, formal coaching events, formal training, helping them succeed at their job past just the how-to of their job that you have to train. Give everybody just a second here. We've got about 45% of people have answered. So let's get a few more people answering here just to make sure we get a large enough sample size. There we go. Now it's pouring in. All right. So based on what we're seeing here, I'll give it just another second because there's quite a few more answers still coming in. All right. This is a good sample. 3, 2, 1. All right. Let's go ahead and publish that. So not overly surprised. We're showing about 66% of folks are really saying, hey, this is 4 hours or less, meaning we're not giving enough time. Some of you are in the 5 to 9. That's a good start. Others are going 10 to 14. That's probably more what I would expect to see, and a really high performer would be 15 hours plus. This is just a simple way to measure how do you even give this amount of time? What do you even work on? And that's what we're going to slow down for you today and help connect some of those dots when Jeremy and I go a bit deeper here. There's really just this simple strategy that we think about, and it's this: develop the skills of your people. No matter where they work from, if you increase their skill, it will drive their performance. And Richard Branson's got some great quotes. You've probably seen this before. This is probably a repeat at sometimes because I just love this. There's this big question of, and this fear, and I feel it all the time towards my employees, just so you know, and I have to always remind myself of this. So I can relate if you've ever thought it's so expensive, it's so hard to do it. Well, what happens if we invest in developing our people and they leave us? And then the counter question, right, is, well, what happens if we don't invest and they stay? That's even more scary, right? That's even more of what freaks me out a little bit in terms of what could happen. So when we navigate this together, you've got to realize that training people well enough so they can leave, and then you treat them well enough so they don't want to. That's what really kicks off development planning at a high level. Because when you invest in your people, these are all the things that we see come out of it. Not just helping with attrition, not just developing the performance culture, but common language, right? It helps really organize your vision. That development planning is what helps connect and really is the communication tool that drives through a business. And the counter, right? What really happens if you're not investing in your people? This is what you can expect to see happen. Investing in your people is the best thing you could do. It's the best ROI I believe you can get in your organization as you continue to grow your business. And the last thing I'll share on this is this. Some of you may be thinking, oh, well, it will be different with a pandemic or, economy dropping. It won't be. Let me tell you what my experience was back in 2009 and what I've continued to hear from people who have navigated through these really treacherous times. When there's a less vibrant job market, you're right. The reality is less people are probably going to leave your organization. But what I find actually is that it's the low performers have no desire to leave. They just want to stay seated. The really high performers, they're still looking for opportunities and they'll still find them. That's just the reality. So you have to still go after those high performers. You have to ensure that they're taken care of at the highest level. Don't fall for that trap as we navigate through this together and we come out the other side in the next year or so as this smoke continues to clear over the next few months. But there's going to be some longing effects of this economy, of course. And we just need to be careful of how we approach. And getting into development planning right now is going to be a huge, huge step to really help us. So I think I've set this up well enough for Jeremy to start to bat down what goes into development planning. I'm going to have one other ask before I bring him in. I want you to think of an employee. Right now, just take a moment on your piece of paper, on your note doc, whatever you're using to take notes on. Pick an employee. Think of the employee that's maybe not performing as well. Maybe they're not fully engaged at the level you wish they were. Maybe they're just not hitting the potential you know they're capable of, not taking the level of ownership you want. This can be a lot of different versions of how you would pick this employee that's just not up to the speed. And what I promise you is we're going to go through this, and as Jeremy and I continue to teach the next 35 minutes here together, we're going to continue to come back to this employee and ask you a really thought-provoking question that makes you think twice about what could be your next step for that employee. And I want to slow that down for you so you realize that you're going to be able to leave with essentially an action step and your prep done for development planning. We're literally going to walk you through the prep you have to think about before you go to all of your employees, and more importantly, those that have built up leaders within your business, be able to go to your leaders to be able to take that in to their teams that they're supporting. So follow along. I think you'll find that this preparation will really help support you through this step. So without being said, Jeremy, if you want to come up on video here, and I'll jump off video here in just a moment.
Sure.
Thanks for joining us, Jeremy. Take it
Thanks for
away
having me.
and help us understand what goes into development planning.
Awesome. Well, thanks for inviting me into this conversation today, Casey. Just to give a quick background on why I've come into this conversation today, I have a background that has both corporate experience in HR as well as entrepreneurial experience. And so we wanted to really have a dialogue that allowed us to think about both blue collar and white collar operating in the gray as well as the black and white, especially in an environment like COVID. And also to understand that all of this applies all the time. This isn't a now issue. This is an opportunity in this moment, as Casey has said, and we want to lean into that opportunity to get to know our people better and be better at developing talent. But this is not just an issue for this moment. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So a lot of people are asking, what do we mean by development planning? What is this? So I want to take a step back and share a little bit around what we learned when we were thinking about this from a large organization standpoint, 12,000 plus in the technology industry, predominantly high salary, white collar folk. What do we need to do? What is this? What do people care about in this environment? And everything that we saw pointed back to sort of old school thinking, the idea of a personnel department, the idea of human resources. And so from this, beautiful business clip art that you see, it's this idea of if we give them the right things, we will build the ideal leaders, we'll build the ideal talent. We'll build career paths, we'll have ladders, we'll do this activity and that activity, and then they'll get to this place. But what we found, if you could advance to the next slide, was that the world has actually shifted quite a bit, and that what employees want, what people want is, not 1950s anymore. That's why you've seen so many companies move away from this idea of, hey, this is a personnel department, and move much more around how do we engage, how do we attract and retain talent so that we don't have those costly attrition issues, or when we do have attrition, it is wanted and expected, because there is positive attrition as well. And so what we thought would be true, and this is a lot of people have done research on this, this is not specific to the tech industry, but ultimately we thought that people showed up and they said, we want to have a defined career. We want to have path A to path Z. We want the company to map this out for us and help us get the development at bats, what they want along the way. And what we really found was that things like internal mobility, flexibility, skill building, and growth, that's what people wanted. And that's what drove different talent to different types of companies. And so whether it be a very, white collar environment or blue collar environment, that didn't matter. What mattered was, does my boss or manager understand where I'm at, where I need to grow to be good in my role, and also what skills I'd like to get, so that, as Richard Branson pointed out earlier, I have the skills and capability to leave. I just don't want to because I feel invested in. And so career paths became irrelevant. And what started to happen more was mapping out an option, a path of journeys. What skills do I want, and how do I get there? And so what I want to focus on today in the what is development planning, before Casey then takes us further with, okay, how do I go do this, is a few steps or a framework around how do I sit down and think about this? And you're going to get to do that with the workshopped employee that you picked before this section began. So let's move ahead to the next slide. So you're going to hear me go over this several times because I want you to understand that the development plan, while it is tailored, it is specific to the individual, it's also repeatable. You're not going to have to go off and do a million different things. While each individual is going to need some very specific developmental opportunities, and that part's individualized, the way to frame this up and think about it, that's quite repeatable and scalable. And so once you get this muscle, you build this capability, you get comfortable with it, this becomes second nature. And a lot of you will say, hey, I've experienced this with my advisor. That's right. Part of our key job with working with you is to help skill you up as a CEO. And so we're also going through a developmental planning process with you. So none of this actually should feel strange or unfamiliar, but I want to make sure that you leave with a framework that you understand, okay, I've done this for one employee. I've started to think about this. Now I can go and do this for the rest of my team. So step one, you need to measure where the employee is currently at. So we've got a red structure here on the chart to the right that shows you the measurement of the current capability of the employee. Okay, and this is called a radar chart, and these are in Excel. as well as on Google Slides. So there's an opportunity to develop these for your team. We're not going to talk about that today, but your advisors will have the information from me if you want to go and do this for your team. I just love this as a visual way to capture where someone's at and where they need to grow. So the second piece is understanding this blue piece, where their personal desire is to grow, and also what they need to grow to be excellent within their current role and to continue to stretch within the organization. The second step is, what's the gap between these? What do we need to go develop? What at bats do we have to go? What trainings do we have to go? And we'll get very tactical about that as this conversation goes on. But ultimately, what's the spread between the red and the blue? And sometimes you'll see, as demonstrated here, sometimes the skills beyond what's needed, and that's okay too. But you need to, keep sharpening that edge and not let it go dull. But in any case, what is that gap? And then co-create a plan. Work with your employee to figure out, what are we going to go do to get you to stretch these spaces? And the reason I really like the radar chart is not only does it create visualization around something that's really hard to quantify, but it also creates this metaphor for me. It's this rubber band, right? If you're stretching in one way, there's tension on the other side. And so we have to remember that it is hard to grow in multiple angles at the same time, which is why you need a plan here. You need to prioritize, you need to work through the steps. So we're going to go through these 4 buckets that you see on the right side: personal preferences, soft skills, hard skills, and advanced learning. And those are really the framework that we wanted to use to help you think about the different categories that you need to work through with your employee. So first off, personal preferences. What makes your people tick? What makes you tick? You hear us talk about this all the time as your advisors. Predictive index, you need to use it. Pro tip, all right? Because ultimately this helps you measure not just team chemistry, but it also helps you understand what creates energy for your team, what inspires them, but also what zaps that energy, what can destroy their productivity. So by using the predictive index, you'll have a beautiful and well thought out tool that will help you understand that about your employees and have a really good dialogue around that. The key thing that I want to point out, sort of the major takeaway that I want from personal preferences, is by knowing this element of your employee, you will make a very strategic decision around how to reward, recognize this employee. The mistake that we all make as leaders, and we've all made this, and we're going to continue to make it, is we assume that our people want exactly what we want. And so if you're someone like me who's highly competitive, who likes to see the scoreboard go up, which means trying to make more money, et cetera, get the higher title, I assume that of my employees. A lot of my employees don't want that. And when I try to push that on them, that makes them really uncomfortable. They're not at this to grow. They just want to have a great impact and do their job really well. And if I don't know that about them, I could actually push really good talent out the door, or I could waste a lot of money trying to promote them and show recognition in a lot of different ways that's not as important to them. And so that's something to really key in on here. Also, time and schedule. What do they want their lives to look like? Wow, are we dealing with this right now? Our lives and work have come together in an unprecedented way. Yes, I just said unprecedented. So that's COVID bingo, slot number 3. But ultimately, this is something that we're all dealing with. And so we need to understand from our folks, what do they want that balance to look like? And how can we help them facilitate that? I know here at Cultivate, for example, we have folks who really want to try to carve out time that's clear and defined for outside of their life. And they make that defended, right? And so they work with their managers around, how do I get all of the work in that I need to get done so that I can have the space that I want in the rest of my life? Now, when those things are blended together, it's all the more important. And then as I talked about before, but this really needs to be hammered home, you need to understand not just what ticks for different people in terms of, do finances drive them, et cetera, but what are their financial needs and goals? Because ultimately, as you saw, there's a huge cost to training and developing, but even bigger to attrition. If we don't understand our employees' financial needs and goals, then we can't sort of build the right reward system and drive along with them in order to meet those needs. So let's come back to our employee on the next slide. And I want you to think about what are the biggest needs and motivators for this individual? Do you understand what makes them tick? Do you know what they're trying to do in terms of finance, in terms of their personal growth? And it's okay if the answer is no, but we got to go solve that quickly. We need to know this about our people. And predictive index can be a helpful tool within that. But ultimately, do you know what the needs and motivators are for this person? And if you do, how are you fulfilling those today? So score that on a scale of 1 to 10 and score how they're doing on a scale of 1 to 10. So you can, again, start to identify it's where are they at now, what's the gap, and then we can co-create the plan. So let's move on to the next category. Soft skills. So soft skills, this runs the gamut. You hear soft skills, it brings up a lot of different ideas. There are 3 sort of key soft skills that we see all the time, and I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about them today. But ultimately, what's important about thinking about soft skills, and really all of these buckets, is that there are multi-layers to the onion. So you can throw something up like, I need my salespeople to be great communicators. Cool. You need to do better than that. You need to appeal to the next level. So I've got an example here of a radar chart of what a salesperson might need in terms of communication capabilities. All right. So I graded it on a five categories as subcomponents of communication: written comms, meeting management, presenting, sales communications, and customer service. Now, the inner part of the spider web or radar chart, that's where they are currently. And then the spread to the outer, the orange, that's the gap. And so again, you would sit down with your employee and you would say, where do we think you're at today? Where do you need to go to be great at your role? And also, where do you want to go? So it's bringing both of those components together, measuring that gap, and then figuring out together what opportunities, what at-bats, what development needs to go take place. So let's switch again to our hypothetical, or I shouldn't say hypothetical, but our practical exercise here on the next slide. What are 2 soft skills in this employee that absolutely need further development? So again, I challenge you to actually make it a subcategory, not just one of these big conflict resolution or anything like that, but more of a subcomponent of one of those buckets that you saw: time management, communications, etc. Identify those 2, put a score for where they are today and where you think they need to be, so you can create that gap. And again, you're going to bring that back to your conversation with them to then start to develop that plan. Our next category is the hard skills. So hard skills, a point I want to actually make, even before I dive into the depths of this, we think that hard skills is what we need to hire on. And the fact of the matter is there are a lot of non-negotiables in terms of what talent we need to do a certain role, especially the more technical the role is. But oftentimes the hard skills are the things that we actually can find more ease to train. And so don't paint yourself into a corner when recruiting. And this is a whole other topic, but worth pointing out. You don't want to paint yourself into a corner around saying, I need 12 years of experience and they need to know this software, and that software. The truth of the matter is, if you know that there's somebody who can learn quickly and has a lot of the sub capabilities that you're trying to hire for, break down those requirements and make sure that those hard skills are actually needed or that they're trainable. And the reason I want to bring that up is because hard skill development is important, and a lot of this stuff needs to be technically built, but a lot of it you can develop in them as well. And so again, this can be anything from how they do their job to the subcomponents of how they work. I want you to, let's flip to our employee again and think about what needs to shift around the hard skills for this employee in order to increase their success. They're not currently where we want them to be. What do they need in terms of hard skills to make up for that gap? How far are they from where they need to be? And then again, you're going to sit down and co-create. And then our last topic and our last bucket that I like to think about when development planning is advanced learning. So advanced learning is sort of a horizontal that cuts across. As you're bringing people through their development process, advanced learning is often the thing that sort of connects the pieces and levels them up, and then they sort of start over again, right? It's like graduated learning stairs that Casey showed earlier. And so when I think about advanced learning and development for employees, I want to think about, how do I get them outside of their role? How do I get them to think company-wide? How do I get them to think broader? And how does that then help them do their job better? So this is the ability to both widen and narrow the lens to be better at their work and ultimately up level. And so the exercise here that I want you to think about on the next slide is, my edit didn't get captured there. I apologize for that. Ultimately, what is one area where you would like your employee to learn outside of their lane? So if you've got someone who's sitting in, let's say, a customer service role, and you feel like they don't really understand operations, what what is an opportunity to get them that exposure? So I want you to think about where they're at and what outside of their world actually could help them be better inside of their world. And then I want you to think about 1 or 2 meetings that you could just invite them to even just be a fly on the wall to get that exposure. And this is going to start to drive that advanced learning. You'll start to see, oh, this employee actually does not have any sense of how we get the product from point A to point Z, and yet they're dealing with helping customers struggle with the problems. By educating them, by filling in that gap, they're going to be way better at customer service because they're going to understand this and they're going to be able to speak in a much more direct manner because they'll have expertise around what they're talking about. Next slide, please. So again, the framework is simple, tailored to the individual, but repeatable. Where are you at today? Where do you need to go to be great in your role? And also, what skills do you want to develop? And that's an important one. That's not one that we've really talked about today. And that'd be part of when you sit down and you co-create. You really want to understand from them. And again, Casey's going to share a little bit more about when you start capturing this data. But ultimately, you're blending what they need to be great at and also what they want to be great at. And you're measuring the gap between where they are now and that destination point. That gap will then help you co-create your plan. So simple 3 steps: the current, the desired and needed, that gap, co-create the plan. Use these 4 buckets. You again can drill down with your advisor to identify the skills in each bucket that are most important to you. But ultimately, repeating this, coming back to it, being able to look at that progress year over year, starting to identify as an organization, almost a rubric around what would be great within these functions in terms of skill level capability. That's where this starts to really scale. Again, you're not career pathing people, but you are identifying what's deeply needed in the boxes, and you're giving them the skills so that they can go and get an amazing job elsewhere, and they don't want to. And guess what? That's going to save you a ton of money on attrition because they're going to want to stay with you and keep developing. And it's going to attract cheaper talent. And attracting cheaper talent is huge because then you know you can develop it and you're not dealing with the 250% cost of attrition of a senior level because you've built someone with your company. Next slide. So the last thing I want to leave you with before Casey walks us through what the process should look like and how you have these conversations and build this all in is you have to look in your mirror. You have to look straight in the mirror because we can't expect our team to do this if we can't do it for ourselves. And this is what you should be doing with your advisor, is really stepping back and saying, where do I need to go? My business is at A, I want to get it to Z. What does the CEO need to look like at Z? What are my gaps to get there? And then co-create that plan with your advisor. Go get those at bats, whether it's using our learning center or development opportunities through Cultivate, or just going and doing some of this work with your people and skilling up on leadership. But ultimately, you got to look at your current capabilities across the propeller. You have to articulate that destination. You need to understand what's required of capability to get there. Build that plan, execute, grow, revise, iterate from that, rinse and repeat over and over again. This is how you skill up. You're going to be doing the same thing with your employees. Use your advisor, use your senior team. You need to be driving this with your seniors so that this can be cascaded across your entire organization.
Jeremy, that was super helpful.
Back now to share with us what goes into development planning.
Well, you just shared what went into development planning. I think that ultimately what was really good there that was shared is those 4 components that you shared there, Jeremy, is what really connects to go, what is it that I'm actually capturing from these people? And as you shared, Jeremy, I'm now going to take that and go, how do you put that into practice in a tangible sense? So thank you for giving us the deep dive into that area. I know that helped a lot of people get a lot clearer on what's actually explained. So I see a couple hand claps come along. So thanks so much, Jeremy. I'll let you jump off. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
I'm now going to connect this to the performance piece, like I was just sharing. And I'm going to go back to this performance culture slide. And you may have seen this before. I think we even taught some of this at Catapult. Again, we're taking this from the Patrick Lenciani, the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team book. And this is such a good just guide to be able to see a little clearer of everything that has to go into the environment as a leader to be able to see this high level of results. And again, this development planning, you're probably starting to see how those skills really kind of connect to this. So I want to do a quick 1 through 10 exercise. I want you to think and just add these up as we go along here. I want you to look at trust and rate yourself, right? Jeremy just talked about looking in the mirror. I want you to rank yourself for a moment. And think about this employee. Think about this employee. 1 to 10, how much trust do you have? How much does this person trust you? How much do you trust them? 1 through 10. And you're going to want to do this exercise because I've got a poll coming to see where you come out at in terms of a score. So write down the number 1 through 10 for trust. How much trust do you have with that employee that you chose? Now let's go to conflict. 1 through 10. 10 again being I have just an unbelievably open conflict out there. We can talk about anything. We can have those hard conversations. 1 being we can't. Like we're always walking on eggshells. It's really difficult to have a really open, assertive, conflicting-based conversation when we need to have it. 1 through 10 there. Let's look at the commitment side, 1 through 10. How committed are they? How committed are you to them? Again, 1 through 10. Just pick that number. And then that 4th one here, accountability. How accountable is that individual? But also, how accountable are you to them? And how good are you at holding them accountable as it relates on that 1 through 10 scale? And then that 5th one there, how are they doing? How's that employee doing on results, 1 through 10? And how are you at getting them to those results? Again, so you should have 5 numbers. You should have 1 for trust, conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. I want you to add those 5 up. So it'd be a max total of 50. And I want you to add up just a bit of what is that individual's performance score? And this is just a really simple way to measure. So again, back to what Jeremy's saying, where are we at now? And what do you want to see this get to in terms of that number? And it's probably not a 50, just to set some clear expectations. Now, as people are adding those 5 numbers up, I do want to go ahead and launch a poll just to capture this. I'm more just curious where these numbers are coming in at. What level is the performance culture that you're having for that employee? I'm just curious here. And again, your options anywhere from 19 below, 20 to 29, 30 to 39, or 40 or more. Where is this employee at in terms of the person that you picked? And as you think about that performance culture, does it start, when you start to look at those different elements, does it start to connect for you of where the breakdown was? Did you see a score that was so much lower than the others? That helps you start to identify what the root is and where to go spend your energy and spend your time, which is why I wanted to bring this exercise. And it looks like quite a few people have jumped in here on the poll to share their numbers. Others are still adding. But it looks like we're pretty well spread. Most there are looking at the, as you can see, the 20 to 29 or the 30 to 39 is really where people are at, which I'm not overly surprised. We've got 1 person who selected 19 or below. If you are 19 or below, that's a hard thing to come back from. And that's almost a good rule of thumb to go, can I salvage this? Can I turn this with that individual? And so just a kind of a quick rule of thumb, this is a good way to start to measure to go, do I have the right person? Are we able to recover this and get back to a performance culture that we need within the organization? I'm going to keep kind of walking through each of these and connecting through that same process that Jeremy did. When you think about the trust aspect of building up this employee planning, right? You're sitting down, you're having the conversation with them. It's very hard to get into development planning with an employee if you do not have trust. And when you think about these 3, I want you to think about the 3 ways to how people choose to trust you. Is it personal? Are they trusting you personally, meaning your character? Are they buying into who you are? Do they like you? Do you like them? That can really limit trust. On the professional side, do they trust your competency? Do you trust theirs, right? Do you believe they actually have the ability to do it? Do they believe you have the ability? And not just that, but also the tact. Do you have the right tact in terms of your professional approach? And then the 3rd one I see is the purpose, this common goal, this alignment that, okay, this is what you want. This is what I want. How are they aligned in terms of our vision, in terms of our goals we're working towards? If you're not slowing that down in the right conversation and getting clear on that, you'll have a very hard time building the trust to feel comfortable talking about the development planning aspect. And so I'm more just curious, throw in the chat, which one can you improve, right? Write that down. Which one could you focus on? You can't probably focus on all 3 of these, but you could probably pick one of these and go, you know what? I'm going to make a bigger effort over the next month or 2 to really be better at building trust with my team on this element of trust. And that is really where you start to understand and go, this could start to really create that engagement or reduce some of that attrition as I continue to develop and plan. Again, a great example to think about with this employee. Rate those trust levels on personal, professional, and purpose, not just the overarching theme. And then think about what will help increase that trust. And that's a great simple question you can ask yourself, an example, and you can even ask them to do this exercise and have them list these things out. Again, this is preparing you to go into that development planning meeting with any employee. On the conflict side, I wanted to give you a couple pro tips. Again, conflict's a bit of a weird way to say it, but it's really just that ability to have open conflict. When people don't, if they have trust, they'll start to share the conflicts. And when the conflicts are shared, that's when relationships are strengthened. And so I share this to give you just a simple process. And again, maybe you've seen this before, but for others that haven't, this is a great way to bring this into your environment. Preparation, acknowledge, validate, and agree. Those are the 4 steps you can follow. So both prepare, meaning don't have a conflict in a whimsical way, just all of a sudden randomly. If you realize a conflict is coming, there's emotions that need to be diffused on either side, you schedule a separate time, you separate the meeting, and you have the conflict separately from whatever your engagement is with that individual. And you agree on the preparation of what we will bring. The person who has the emotions that arise, they need to acknowledge that their emotions have arisen and share to the other person. Then that person has to validate and really show they were listening and they are hearing and putting themselves in their shoes, in which case the other person validates, they then agree on next steps, and they set the co-plan moving forward. This is a simple tool you can take back to your teams to start to show if you have a conflict, this is the way to introduce it. Great opportunities in a development planning meeting to share this, to go, if you ever have a conflict, this would be the way I would hope you would approach it. That's the big master tip here that helps you start to build this type of organization with the right culture. And a quick tip, the part that everybody gets stuck on the acknowledgement side, is the acknowledgement side. That's where they get stuck, is how do I actually share what my conflict is in a concise way without just going on and on and on. And so, because their emotions are there. This is just a simple example. When you do X, Y, and Z, I feel these emotions. I need X, Y, and Z because the why of it feels X, Y, and Z. Those are the ways that you can describe this. If you give this to people to share and give them the direction to share what was on their brain, you will find you get so much better, concise and clear elements of what's really holding them back. And it starts to open up that conflict, kind of open tact, assertive behavior within the organization. So again, with this employee, before I have a development planning meeting, I have to ask these questions. What conflict needs to be resolved? What needs to be resolved with this employee, either for me or that maybe they have with me, and I need to check in that they don't have any conflict issues with me. And then when will you make this a priority, right? The question is, when will we make this conflict a reality? Does it have to happen now? Can it happen later? Having clarity and alignment on that together is super, super crucial as you continue to navigate employee development. On the commitment side, again, I've got 2 more kind of steps to get to the high-level results. Their commitment is measured this way. It's their buy-in to the goal, right? And the effort it will take to get there. And the question is, will they do the work? I don't know. You know that about your employees, obviously. But you have to figure out, will they actually do the work? That is meaning they're committed. But your commitment to connect it back to what Jeremy was saying of what goes in development planning is the skill. You have to have the commitment to increase their skills so they can thrive in that role. That is the shared commitment that happens within a performance culture. And that's, again, connects back to this development planning approach and why it's so important to work through that checklist that Jeremy gave you of those 4 buckets. Simple example, and I know a lot of you have seen this with us, but again, just for the purpose of this employee and being fully prepared going in to this meeting, you'd want to rate this employee on commitment and skill 1 through 10. Generally, I like to think of it more as a tasks versus the person. So make sure you're thinking about what is the tasks, the 2 or 3 tasks that I'm going to be focused on with that person that we're going to be working on coming out of that development planning meeting. You want to rate the 1 through 10 on commitment and skill. And if you've done that, you can actually place that on the boxes here. And again, this comes from the Ken Blanchard model. It's situational leadership model out of the book 1 Minute Manager, if you want to get further reading on that. But this is such a great way to help identify just quickly, this is where my skill is at down here. Sorry, there, it looks like my pointer selection came up. And then the commitment side, you come over, it tells me I need to delegate. Maybe I'm not delegating and I'm actually getting too much in the weeds with them and I'm annoying them. Or maybe they have really low commitment and low skill. I have to coach them instead. This starts to tell you, and again, there's so much more training on how to do these, which you can find in our LMS online in the platform. It goes through all this training for you. But what's so crucial about this is, again, when you come in, how you might approach them. Are you being overly directive? Are you going to coach them through that meeting? Are you going to support them? Or are you going to delegate, hey, let's go put this, and this in motion because they've been around forever and they're really high skilled and have the ability to do that? Those are the decisions you have to make and you have to be conscious of. Now, the accountability is that fourth element. And as it relates to development planning, this is the common mistake I see happen. You have this great development planning meeting, you put all this in motion, and then nothing happens. Shame on you. That's the one thing you can't let happen if you go invest your time to do this, because I'm telling you, it will support you through this time more than ever. Make sure you have your consistent reoccurring meeting structure. I know a lot of you, it's a big belief we have, EOS talks about as well. Everybody believes in this consistent reoccurring meeting structure, move the ball forward. This is a great screenshot. If you want to just grab, again, this is in the LMS, if you want to take this class, it walks through how to do each of these steps, and it talks through how to prepare and how they prepare, how to check in, how to then review the goal and make sure they have the learning, set the new goal for that time period, leverage administrative thoughts, and then validate the goal. That includes them validating the goal. It's so important that you take that development planning meeting and connect it to the accountability. That way you're able to continue the meetings and take that development planning through the meetings and don't lose it. So bring those notes, bring those thoughts, and put it in whatever system you're using to manage your accountability and consistent meeting structure. You'll be so happy you did that. You have a much better chance of implementation. So again, with this employee that was disengaged, do you need to shift your frequency or maybe the consistency of your meetings with them right now, especially being more remote? Or what's the biggest tweak you need to make in your approach of the consistent meeting structure that's going to help you put yourself in the right position? These are the right questions you need to be asking, again, for that person to reestablish the right relationship coming out of those development planning meetings, which is essentially a partnering meeting. Development planning is a partnering meeting. They're the same thing. So these are the four that help us get to the results on the performance culture. I know you've seen this now several times, but I just want to keep kind of re-engaging this with you. If you want to see how does this work in terms of the life cycle of an employee, it looks a little something like this. So you bring the employee in, the way you set expectations, you capture their desires, you're starting to capture some of that personal bucket that Jeremy shared. The planning and partnering comes in, you're establishing the goal, the micro goals, you're understanding the gaps of their skills. That would be where that spider diagram comes into play, and you start to understand that in pursuit of the goals. On the consistent meeting structure, you find yourself problem solving and holding accountability and giving them significance by having the meetings and keeping it going. A lot of you said you're not giving enough training and coaching time, so that's where you're enhancing and tweaking their skills. People start to slow down on this portion. And then you have to keep coming back and doing these partnering meetings, AKA development planning meetings. And it's good to use assessments and make sure that's two-way, right? You need to get their feedback as well. You're skipping number one, and then they keep rotating 2 through 5. And that is ultimately what this looks like in practice in terms of slowly capturing the information you need as they first start with you. And then as you get a review and partnering period, it starts to kick off over and over and over again. And that's what connects the dots. So are you ready to approach this employee in a different way is the big question today. And I'm conscious of time. I'm pretty much to the end. I've just got a few final slides, so stick with me if you're able. I appreciate it. But you have to ask yourself, are you ready to approach this employee in a different way based on this conversation today? That was the big outcome for all of you. How do I create development plans with my people? So we talked about what happens if we don't. We talked about what actually goes into it. Jeremy did a great job giving us a nice framework. And then we actually connected to what it looks like in performance and what the other prep items you have to do to be prepared to go into that development partnering meeting. So for those of you here that have this and you go, wow, I really need to step up my game on this, you have a few options. One, go to your advisor, share this. This is really important. It's something you want to add to the roadmap. The advisors will help you prioritize that, and we'll get that into the stream of consciousness. Two, if you want to watch this webinar again or any of the other webinars that I do, just know that you can go to the LMS on the platform and click on CEO webinars as the course, and you'll have access. We've organized this based on the year of when we've ran those webinars. Some of the ones that we were able to record, really encourage you to go check those out again. This is going to be a good one to come back to, and especially if you want to share this with your leadership team. The other thing is if you want to get additional training, a lot of this content came from our LMS. If you go to our dynamic leadership course, there's actually training on the accountability meetings, on the development planning. Really great videos. If you haven't engaged with that, I encourage you to start doing that. This can take you to the next level. And it's also a great option to get your employees in here as your leadership team to be able to take it as well if that's something you're interested in. These are the topics that are within that dynamic leadership course if you're interested in going, kind of just moving this training to the next level. Take advantage of our perks is the big message I have for you. Obviously, if you have anybody you could refer to us, we'd really appreciate it. We're all trying to fight and thrive here through this period. So if you have somebody, it could earn $1,000 into you for advising credit. So keep that in mind. But again, Jeremy brought up the PI assessments. Under the perks page, you can request PIs for your team to start to learn a bit more about this. And again, if you are interested, that's where you go to select the add the LMS user to maybe bring in a leader so they can take some of the course training. Friendly reminder, Catapult 2020, let us know if you're coming or not. Now's the time to sign up. You can find that under the events page. So please navigate there and let us know. We are trying to get a bit of an idea of head count as we try to navigate what we're going to do virtual or in person and virtual. And again, our next event is June 17th in terms of us all coming together. It'll be about increasing your marketing funnel with Conrad Kozuch joining us, our marketing director here at Cultivate. We're excited to share those details with you. Thank you for your commitment to your people. It's so crucial during this time. By you coming here, I knew that was very important to you. So thank you for that. And here we are. So if you could, everybody, we're going to throw a link. If you could jump into this forum, you're going to find where it says the takeaways from this webinar. Share with us, what did you learn? We want to capture these in our forums. And if you have additional questions for me or Jeremy, we'll be watching, so will the other advisors. If you throw out questions in that forum, we'll be glad to get you those answers. With that, I think we found ourselves to the end. So do me a favor, as a big thank you, jump on to that and share the takeaways that you grab. That helps us tailor our content. And again, it keeps us all in one place. And that takeaway you have may really resonate with somebody when they come back and view this in a month's time. Thanks everybody for leveraging your day with us today. I apologize we went just a few minutes over. Jeremy, thanks again for the participation. Be safe, everybody. Take care.